Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal, starting the week off on this Monday. That's July 10th, 2017 day on our calendar. And before I get started today, I got a great story to tell, one that'll really shock you. I did this years ago, and I followed the story regarding the Duplessis Orphans, but I want to go back and play an interview I did with Rod Vienneau, and just to refresh your memory. But anyway, first, if you go to my website at arcticbeacon.com, arcticbeacon.com, it'll direct you to another site, one that we're starting. It's Greg Anthony's Journal.wordpress.com, and we're getting that started. It's in the infant stages. You'll be directed there. And also, you'll be directed to a support page. I'm running a pledge drive. Any little bit helps. We're a listener-funded show. You know as well as I do that advertisers and the mainstream will not touch these stories, and they won't help. They are not going to advertise on shows like this. But let's get to Rod Vienneau. I want to try to get this interview in as much as I can today. Now, for 15 long years, he's been trying to get justice for these horrendous crimes committed against his wife, Clarina. It's been a long, long, hard battle. A fight that looks like the David Goliath of our time, since the U.S. and Canadian governments are complicit in this story. It's an amazing story, and they really are. It's incredible. And they're fighting him tooth and nail. Yes, they are. And the reason for the government barricade at revealing the truth is Vienneau's case opens up a huge can of worms, exposing the government-sanctioned torture, the complicity of the Vatican, and many, many other things. And it's the abuse of they estimate, more than 50,000 children involved in illegal psychiatric government-sanctioned experimentation programs. Vienneau's wife, Clarina, was one of the thousands of children experimented on during the 50s and 60s in what has become known the Duplessis Orphan case. You can Google that, folks, and there's a lot on it. And I happened to talk to the journalist, I'll get to her in a second, who wrote much on this story, and she was on my show. But this woman, Clarina, as well as others, is now seeking justice for crimes including illegal mind-altering drug experimentation, physical beatings, tortures with whips and chains, while being collared like a dog, ice baths, sleep deprivation, and other crimes that just shocked the conscience. Clarina's case has resurfaced by the hard work of this freelance journalist, Christine Hahn. She was on my show, and she has spent 2 years of her life working with Vienneau and other victims like him, trying to document and bring justice to these high-level officials, as well as the Vatican's involvement in this. It's incredible. It's a horrendous story. Doctors were responsible for horrendous child abuse, even killing children. It's crazy. It's just crazy. But anyway, I thought what I'd do is go back and look at this story from the eyes of Rod Vienneau, and I had him on my show way back when, in 2007. Wow, how time flies. So let's see what Rod had to say regarding the Duplessis Orphans.
Continuing quest to get to the truth on the Investigative Journal is something that I share with many hundreds of people, thousands of people across America who've been guests on this program, who tell stories that are suppressed in this country. People, credible people, researchers, people with integrity, people who follow the Lord, come on this show and tell the other side of the story, and the real other side of the story. And I want that to continue. So if you go to my website at www.arcticbeacon.com, I am running a monthly pledge drive. If you can help in any way possible to make it through this month, I would appreciate that, because the truth is hard to get out, but even harder to fund when you have all this black ops money going to the media to keep, for example, Why do all these guys on CNN and MSNBC make millions of dollars? And they don't even get to the truth. They play these political games and keep you from the truth. That's why they get paid so much, to keep you from the truth, not to get at it. So if you want to help, if you want to just be a part of getting at the truth, please do, because that's what we do on this show, and I'm not afraid to say it. So go to my website at www.arcticbeacon.com, and you can donate. It's an easy job there. Go to Support Arctic Beacon. Also, go to this website of republicbroadcasting.org. That's the new website of this radio station. RBNLive.com is no longer there, so it's republicbroadcasting.org. Same company, different call letters, but you can also help them out too, and there is an easy way to do that. If you want to get radio advertising, things like that, go to them, because they're allowing things on their show, their programming that others aren't.
You know, I wouldn't go there, but anyway, this was in 2007, before I really found out what was going on at RBN. But go to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. I know they're on the level, and let's get back to Rod Vienneau.
Okay, we're back. My guest is Rod Vienneau. He's the husband and an activist in Canada of a former Duplessis orphan. Now, this story has been hidden from the American people as well as the Canadian people, but it's starting to get some legs, and people are starting to understand it. Rod Vienneau, how are you today?
Hi, Greg. How are you? Yeah.
Good, Rod.
I'm fine.
You know what? Good. I'd like you to just start out and tell us, who are the Duplessis Orphans? And begin with the story. I think people need to know that. We're going to go over the whole thing with you this hour, so go ahead.
Okay, the Duplessis Orphans are thousands of innocent, sane children who were wrongly labeled and illegally interned in psychiatric hospitals. These children are from unwed mothers who were told to give up their children to these orphanages where they gave birth, and their identity was changed, and they were told their child had died, and the children would end up in a psychiatric hospital.
And now, what orphanages are? Go ahead.
Yeah, and the orphanages, well, the psychiatric hospitals were some in Montreal. And all throughout the province of Quebec. They were just filled the capacity with all. They were emptying the orphanages, because orphanages would get 75 cents a head per day to keep a child. But Maurice Duplessis, who was the premier at the time, he heard that keeping a child in a psychiatric hospital, you could get 3 times that amount. So
there's a money factor involved here. Now,
yeah,
who's involved in this story?
Right.
Now, the orphanages were from where now? Who were the heads of these orphanages?
It was the church, the nuns. The nuns at the time.
Church.
Right, because the premier had gave they had the whole control. The nuns had all the control of all hospitals, all psychiatric hospitals, education, everything. So, and they worked hand in hand, the church and the government at the time. So,
okay, what time frame are we talking about?
1935 till right into the 70s.
Okay, so, and how many children may have been involved in this scandal over the years?
Yeah. In all, we have the international black market babies, okay? There's 300,000 babies born at that time. 200,000 were adopted or sold everywhere in the world. And there was 100,000 attached directly to the Duplessis Orphans case. And these orphans here were placed illegally and labeled and placed into psychiatric hospitals. And
so what we have here is a minimum of 100,000 children who were taken from Catholic orphanages in Montreal and the nearby area.
Right.
Illegally placed in orphanages, the records changed where they were considered to be insane, correct?
Right. If I just take my wife, for an example, Clarina Doogie, and her younger sister, Simone, they were in an orphanage because their mom fell sick of tuberculosis at the age of 31 years old. So their mother was in a hospital, in a sanatorium for her tuberculosis. So one day the doctor, the family doctor, and the priest, they says, well, he told the Mr. Doogie, who didn't know how to read or write, he was a woodsman, and he had 5 children, and she was not coming out, their mother, and she was dying. So they said, we got a place for you at this orphanage in Rimouski, in the province of Quebec. So they were sent there, the 2 girls, and were supposed to get looked after and get a good education. And my wife was 9 years old, her sister was 7 years old. 2 years later, at 11 years old, my wife and a bunch of other girls that were picked out of the group, the non-Psychanazi story, but you've been good girls, and they picked out a dozen or so, and they put them in the bus, and that same day, they ended up at the St. Julian Psychiatric Hospital.
Now, did your wife ever have any psychiatric problems as a child?
Never. And my wife brought up 6 beautiful, healthy children. And
now, so so they take this bus ride. Where did they end up now?
At the St. Julian Psychiatric Hospital. It's a hospital that had over 1,000 young babies and young girls of all ages. So, what they endured during years were tortured and whipped, put into straitjackets, put into cells for days to years, ice cold baths, tied hand and foot to steel beds with a collar, electroshocked, tons of experimental drugs such as chlorpromazine, which is Thorazine in the States, lobotomies. Thousands of our children have died. They're buried in mass graves. Like the pigsty.
Unbelievable.
Like the pigsty.
Your wife's particular story. Yeah, your wife. Can you tell us your wife's story, though? First, that'll give a good idea of what happened to many other people, many other children. But go ahead, tell us what she experienced when she first was taken to that psychiatric institute.
Yeah, well, right away she was, I think it was just about, it's in her, she was put on chlorpromazine right away. And all these kids here, like my wife, they had to work, they had to scrub the place, they were the ones that were doing the cleaning of the real patients. This means cleaning their bodies, washing their bodies and their and everything else. And then for punishment, for peeing in bed or anything, they would be put into cells, straitjacketed. Like my wife, she was tied to a steel bed, and had to wear a collar, ice cold baths, whipped. She still has scars in her back.
Unbelievable. And you also found out that her records were changed too, right? When she tried to get her records, she found out they were altered, correct?
Right. Well, to justify her from the orphanage to the psychiatric hospital, this transfer here, they fabricated another mother. Now, her other mother supposedly be buried in this other huge psychiatric hospital in Quebec City. We were down there, and there is a tombstone there with the name of Clara. This is the first name of her mother, and Abel is Abel Duguay, her father. So whoever this Clara Abel is, we don't know. So they buried her mother 2 years before she really died. They buried her in the 25th of August, 1944, and her mom, her real mom, we've got the records, died in 1946.
And so what they did is they changed the records and then stated she had mental issues, correct?
Like the mother was insane, and it stated there that all the family was insane. They were all crazy, and And so, it was so easy then to take Clarina at the age of 11 years old and ship her, kidnap her, and sequester her in a hospital, kidnap her, and lock her up in a mental institution.
What was their motives for doing this, you think, in these hospitals? You said there was experimentation going on. Did you ever trace some of the doctors and the people working there in collusion with the Catholic Church?
Yes. Well, okay. They were going for the federal funds. They were getting 3 times the amount. So they were still keeping the kids at 75 cents. They were pocketing the other 2. But there's the experiments that we know are attached with the CIA. Okay? You and Cameron.
Okay.
Now, we have evidence. We have now strong evidence, and that we can prove now. You and Cameron and Heinz Lehman were every other day at this Montreal hospital, the Saint-Jean-de-Dieu, that we know that there is over 2,000 in a mass grave, 2,000 kids. And we have one orphan, Silvio Day, that his job while he was in there as an orphan, he had to carry the bodies. And he carried himself around 75 bodies. Because he had to bring them to the morgue downstairs, wash them, and then after that, he complained.
He's one of the surviving Duplessis Orphans talking about this, correct?
Right.
And then you have documentation of CIA involvement here.
Right. Because we have on record, I think it was just about a year and a half ago, that we spoke with a doctor. He's in Florida, and he's living well. He's 82 years old, so he didn't want to take the blame of himself. So he was recorded. We recorded his. So he said, he was asked about Dr. Ewan Cameron in the brain experiment and everything, and the involvement of the CIA. And, he said that Ewan Cameron and Heinz Lehman was at this hospital all the time. And also we have testimony from different orphans seeing these doctors like Cameron and Heinz Lehman. Heinz Lehman is he's the German doctor that came over in 1937. He's the one that brought from Germany the chlorpromazine.
Interesting. We're going to take a short break. Let me take a short break here, and then we'll come back and continue. Okay, back in the Investigative Journal, we're discussing the Duplessis Orphans with Rod Vienneau, whose wife was one of them who survived, one of the lucky ones. Thousands and thousands of children in the Montreal area, in Canada, were slaughtered and put in mass graves. What we have here is a connection between Nazi doctors, the CIA, and others, all for experimentation purposes, as well as collecting money on these kids whose records were changed. And Rod Vienneau's wife is a witness to this and is talking out about it right now in Canada. This story has not ended yet. Along with the gentleman Rod mentioned, who was one of the people responsible for carrying out the children's bodies. Just a horrific story, Rod, and one that people need to understand. Why do you think? How has it been covered up? I know you found out a lot about this over the years. We're going to get into all aspects of the story, but how's it been covered up for so many years, indicating the complicity of the American government and the Canadian government? Go ahead.
Yes, sir. The church, I think, still has much power in this here. And since they worked together with the government in this thing here before, and they're still keeping this under covers. We've got the Minister of Justice that has 240 dossiers and 321 criminal charges filed, complaints from the orphans that they're keeping under high security, and they're stating that nothing ever happened. The only thing that ever happened is some of them got their ears twisted or a little flat behind. But we're not talking about this. We're talking about murders. We're talking about straitjackets. We're talking about cells. We're talking about people that were injected with every kind of drugs. We're talking about lobotomy. And we have...
I want to mention, if anybody's ever thought the Vatican and the governments of the world don't work together for these types of evil purposes, this story is just another example. So you people out there who are in denial about Vatican involvement in the New World Order and their criminal ways over the years, just listen to Rod Vienneau and his wife talk about hundreds, thousands of children murdered and put in graves, mass graves, like worse than animals. I mean, it's incredible to me, Rod.
Yeah, and the pigsty cemetery was right next to the hog farm. So they had this mass grave, and where they were burying the animals, they were just throwing in the kids. And when it was too full, well, they had this huge furnace, and they were burning them there, because we have the testimonies from orphans that were there. And there's some. I sent you a picture on your website. This woman here, she describes what her cell looked like, and the strapping around her neck, and what a straitjacket in her memories when she was just 4, 5, and 6, and 7 years old in the cell. And like this other woman here, also at the age of 16 years old, a beautiful girl, and she could see no light at the end of the tunnel. And she said the only way I'm ever going to get out of here. She was in there from 3.5 years old, and here she is 16 years old. So, and one day she just stopped eating, and on the third day they opened the cell, and they said, if you don't eat your porridge, we're gonna shove a mouse down your throat. So, and she refused, and this is what they did. They pushed a mouse down her throat.
Ugh. And she's testified to this, correct?
She testified to this here on one of the major televisions here, stations, yes, in 93, yeah, and I still have it on tape here.
Unbelievable.
And nobody wants to get involved. Nobody wants it. The federal government are caught in this here case, and the thing is, I think if it was anything else, they would be going at this, they'd be just jumping all over it. It's because criminal acts were done to children, and this is the thing. And now they want to hide this.
With the connection of Catholic orphanages and the government.
Everything,
right.
Yeah, the whole works. The psychiatrist, which is very, very powerful here, in Quebec. The church is very powerful. And now they're even controlling the media, because since we're in provincial elections for the Premier of Quebec, and we've been out now 5 times, and we hit on the Premier at 3 different locations where there was so much media attention. It was unbelievable. We had the cameras and everybody. Nothing came out of this. Nothing. We had big signs there, 4 or 5 foot signs, and nothing, not a word. They talk about the election.
And let me just tell you this. I've had Christine Hahn on my show. She's one of the journalists that is trying to get this story out, and she's told me the problem she's had as far as not getting this story printed in America or Canada. And, it's just amazing to me, after you come on my show, there's not going to be a rush of journalists coming to follow this story. I think in their heart they would love to, but they're prevented because the controllers are so strong. And we talked about who they were, the Vatican with their millions.
Okay, we're going to pick this up in the second half hour. I'm taking a break here in 2017. And also, it was timing. I was taking one back in 2007 at the exact same time. So, come right back. I got more with Rod Vienneau and the Duplessis Orphans on the Investigative Journal.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, back for the second half hour. That was a quick 3 minutes, wasn't it? And I'm getting ready to bring on Rod Vienneau again and the Duplessis Orphan story. I contacted Rob a couple of years ago, and they're still seeking justice. And it reminds me, if you look at what the Vatican's been up to lately, they've been going around spreading this information. They held in January or so, they held a conference on corruption in the Vatican all over the world, and they want to get at the pedophile rings, etc. It's all just a bunch of double talk. This story was never brought up, and it's one that needs to be known to everybody, and verifies what I talk about on this show. And let's get back, because Rod's got a lot to say, and I want to get in as much as I can. Here's Rod Vienneau, back in 2007.
One program note before I get back to Rod.
Okay.
And it is suppressed throughout the world. It's a horrific story. Rod, Duplessis Orphans, named after the Prime Minister for his part in this crime.
Yes.
And you're alleging his part in this crime, Mr. Duplessis. Where are these mass graves? You were talking about the pigsty and these places where they were putting these children next to pig farms.
Yeah, the pigsty.
Where is this located?
The Pigsty Cemetery is located in downtown Montreal. They tried to they sold off parts of the land. They had this hospital had 800 acres, and on this land here they had 2 psychiatric hospitals, and also they had a huge farm, and also they had 2 graveyards. and there's a mass grave. We know there's over 2,000, at least. We have this evidence, over 2,000 kids.
Mass grave, so basically they were just thrown in a hole, right?
Right. And
now, has anybody tried to dig this up to get evidence?
Yes, well, the nuns had sold parts of their land for roads, highways, and another part to the Liquor Commission. Because here it's the government; it's not private. The Liquor Commission belongs to the government. So their land, I think it was in 1999, where they wanted to extend the parking lot, and just some ordinary workers were just digging around where the fence was. They want to extend the fence and get a bigger parking lot. They found femurs, tibias, and different bones. So they made this aware to the Liquor Commission, to the boss. And finally, a couple of days after, they said, well, the bones they belonged to animals. But the workers, they stated on the newspapers, we know the difference between, fingers and animal bones and femurs and hip bones,
So they're covering it up right to that very day, yeah.
Right. And when the nuns sold this part of the land, it was marked that we are not responsible for any contamination in depth and surface on this land. So
now, back to your wife's story, if I may. We can get back to this, but how did your wife finally survive? Because many of these children, you're alleging thousands, have been killed. How did she finally survive? Tell us her story.
Well, the kids, all their identity were changed, okay? Right after they were born. But my wife, she was in this orphanage where she was kidnapped, and they transferred her to this with her younger sister. But her younger sister only came after 2 years later, when she was 11 years old. So when she arrived there, luckily, we should say, very luckily, they had sent her younger sister Simone to this a nun's place to work in. It was kind of a trade school, okay? Just showing them how to knit and this and that. And they just picked her out and sent her there. And one Sunday morning, she escaped from there. She ran away because it was just an ordinary place. There was no guards or no fences or nothing. So she escaped from there, and she arrived down to her place, where is the Gaspé Peninsula in Quebec and along the ocean. And her father was in the woods at the time, so she went right over to her uncle's place. She found out. She asked where her uncle was staying, and she says, we were not in an orphanage. We were in a psychiatric hospital, and please, you got to get Clarina out of there. And it just took one letter, and the hospital, knowing that somebody was looking for them, that was it. All of a sudden, my wife, that's labeled mentally ill, she was let out immediately.
Right, to keep down they figure, well, let's let her go.
And
we can limit the number of people that are going to ever, expose this story, right?
Right, and means that they were living so far away in the Gaspé Peninsula, nobody, it's at the other end of Quebec, there's nothing going, it's only all little towns, little villages, and it still is today the same way, So they knew, there was no worry about any scandal or whatever,
Right, so your wife and her sister get out, they tell the story, and now as we move this story along, many more orphans have come forward, right, in this movement you have spearheaded in Canada. How many more orphans come forward, to your knowledge?
Yeah, I think there's still about 3,000 still alive. Survivors.
And many of these have come forward publicly?
Most of them, yes. They did in 92, 93, they did, yes. And the orphans, there's something there's a criminal, something that's very criminal, is that the orphans still carry the mentally ill label in their medical file. And a lot of these people that they're in in their late 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s are afraid. When they get sick, they're afraid to go to a hospital to get doctor's care for their illness, afraid that this label will send them back into a mental institution. And this is so...
In your wife's case, what about her records? Have they been changed back?
No, sir. They're still profound mentally ill.
Still in your wife's case, too?
Yes.
And she has no signs of mental illness whatsoever, correct?
Oh, no, none of the family has this here. Her own sister Simone with the ears, she has this center down in the Gaspé area. She's got this center for the old folks home and handicapped people, and she's having this here, and the government knows, and she has this here for years and years, and she was on the town council of in her municipality, and she was in the psychiatric hospital. And her brother's that's supposed to be all mentally ill. Her brother, he's 72 or 73 years old. Lionel, he works a crane operator almost all his life. And her brother Joseph is supposed to be crazy. He was a mechanic all his life. And the whole family they're supposed to be crazy. Well, they're workers, and they're all sane people. It was all fabricated.
Right. How are you met? I know you're one of the people in Canada that's moving this movement forward. You're constantly contacting the government, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, everyone to get help. How are you met? How did they greet you, and what have they done to you for trying to get this story out?
You were talking about Christine Hahn. We met about 7 years ago. Who wrote this story in the Freedom magazine twice. But since 1992, I really got, since about 90, I've been in there since 1992, but right in 1993, in the fall, I felt there was something definitely wrong, that somebody was covering up, and I felt the judges, and I felt the Minister of Justice and the government and the church, it was going wrong. So I got into this here myself, and I said, I gotta try and do a little part in this to make things right and get the people to see what happened. And I wrote myself over 2,000 letters to everybody. And when I say everybody, to the Vatican, to the United Nations, I could plaster all my walls with acknowledgments, and they're so nice. Some are even gold trimmed and everything. Which means nothing. They just transfer, they just pass the ball on to somebody else. And I've been on, TV shows. I had major televisions across here in Canada, and from Toronto, Montreal, come here and meet with orphans. This story is not only about Clarina Duhi, my wife. It's all their survivors, every one of them, and it comes on TV when it's a major story. They do it, and that's it. It's forgotten right there. And it's just a huge, huge cover-up. And even
and what they do is basically you send the letters to the important people who are at the top of this. They say, oh, it's a terrible story, but nothing gets done. The media covers it, but never gets to the top of the iceberg of who's really doing this. Right. And in essence, what happens is the story never gets told properly to get justice and to nab the real criminals behind this. Yeah.
Well, right now we have the Citizens Commission on Human Rights in Quebec, Toronto, in the States. We had a press conference on the 5th of February, and there was about 100 people there at the Atwater Library, and we had a lot of journalists there too, and some of the major newspapers, they were there. They took pictures. They saw the whole thing, but there was nothing. The next day there was nothing. There was nothing. They come for the story, and they just keep it. So we had this press conference, and we had people there, like speakers. I was one of them. My wife and I were one of the guest speakers on there. with the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, and we had this lawyer, Alan Stein from Montreal, who is in the Alan Cameron story right now. I think he's with one of the last survivors of the Cameron story, a woman 79 years old. And he was there, he spoke, and, there should have been something. There was television cameras there. There should have been something the next day. And I met, just the week later, I met the lawyer, Alan Stein, at his office in Montreal, and he told me, he says, Rod, did you see anything? I said, nothing. I checked out every station, everything. There was not one single word. So there is a power. There's a power, Greg. It's unbelievable. There is a power, a huge power higher up that's keeping this out of the media. And right now we've got, I just finished writing a book. I'm not a writer, but I said to myself, 6 years ago, I said, I got to try and do something. So I wrote a book. It's finished just since a few days ago. But I've been trying to get a publisher since the last month or so. And I've been going through every publisher in Quebec. Nobody wants to touch it. I've sent parts of my excerpts of my book and like the cover of my book. And it says, it's so sad story, but we can't touch this. But what happens? These publishers get grants from the government. So if they'd ever take this on here and punch the government, well, then after that, goodbye grants. They're not going to get. So
you know what you do, Rod? Send me a copy of that, and I know some people in the States maybe that can help. And if I can contact them, I'd love to try to help you and see if we could get this published somewhere.
Okay.
So if you'd like to do that, I'll call you after the show and we can see what we can do.
Right now,
do you have a name for your book yet?
Oh yes, the cover is made, but the only thing is, right now the book is in totally in French. All right, and I've got and I've got people that said to me the other day, you got to get it printed in English, But this year I got to find people to do this and everything, and it's called if I would translate in English, it's Children of the Great Darkness.
Okay, and here's what I want to do, though. You make sure you can keep that, because I can't read French very well. And what I do, I have a friend from France who contacts me on other stories regarding this, who is very good at finding a translator. So if you do want to send it to me, that's fine. We'll talk, but I want to see if I can help you. We'll get it translated, and then see if we could find somebody here in America.
I'll send you the picture of the cover, Greg. I have it on my email or on my site, and I'll send you a picture of the cover.
That's fantastic. And there's people in this country I know that would get behind your story and the connections you're making. And if I may say this, if anybody out there questions, when I do a lot of stories about Vatican-led New World Order and how they're involved in our country and other countries in the world. And my question has always been this. I say they're either evil or they're good. And this story is another example where you contacted the higher-ups in the Vatican, and if they were good, they would have helped you. They would have come forward. They would have come forward and denounced the government, but instead they don't. They play along with them. So
when I sent my letter to John Paul II, exposing our case, Ratzinger was working on at correspondence. So I believe John Paul II did not get this letter. I believe it was destroyed by Ratzinger, who is the Pope today.
And that's a good possibility, and he's the Pope now. We know where his allegiance is.
Well, yes.
That's a perfect example. If they were good, they would have done something. I mean, this is the most horrendous of things happening in their orphanages.
Well, if anybody goes on Freedom Magazine, it is the crime, North America's crime of the century. Because we're talking about so many, it's from selling babies from $3,000 to $10,000 a head. And they used to put them in the boats here at the Montreal port and just pile them in little cardboard boxes and send them away to France and anywhere in the world. Selling them from $3,000 to $10,000 a head. And then there was the orphans that were shipped into psychiatric hospitals. It's unbelievable.
My guest is Rod Vienneau. And Rod, let me tell you something. What a story this is, and I really hope that we can get to the bottom of this. We know the culprits, and this is just one more story that shows how this country and your country are being really taken over by this New World Order. Don't you agree?
Yes, sir. This is just the way you're saying it, you know. And here in Canada and Quebec, I think the only way that you know, like they're drugging the children today with Ritalin and all this stuff here, and I think it's just until this case here, the Duplessis Orphan case is really cracked open, and that there is a scandal to make the governments realize what happened in the past, and this has got to be in the history books. It's got to be told in school, in the schools, you know.
Right. Right. Let me go to Alabama. We have a caller. You're on the Investigative Journal.
Yes, Greg, thanks for putting me on quick here. I want to mention, if you Google Canadian Holocaust, you'll come across dozens and dozens of this articles on this story that this gentleman's talking about. And they very carefully tell that this is the genocide of Aboriginal people. This must have been the killing off of the Indian tribes in Canada. Is that correct?
It's been going on right across Canada, and I think, you know, I don't want to put I don't want to put the residential schools, because they had their problems, the natives, yes, but it's not the same because they were in residential schools, but the Duplessis Orphans were in psychiatric hospitals. They were labeled, falsely labeled, and illegally interned in psychiatric hospitals, which means...
That's right. I remember reading these stories last year. I come across this, and but the one they talk about is the Canadian. They call it the Canadian Holocaust, and it's about the mental hospitals.
Who is
calling them the Aboriginal people? So I thought it was the Indian people.
This is Reverend Kevin Annette from Vancouver. We know this guy here, and he's the one that's working for the natives in British Columbia and throughout Canada on the residential school, and this is what he calls it, the Canadian Holocaust.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Call back again anytime. Rod, we're all out of time, but listen, let's get in touch after the show, maybe later today or tomorrow. We'll talk about your book, and we'll have you on again. Thanks, Rod, for coming on.
Okay, so that show aired back in 2007 and has been put on the internet all over the place. You can get it. People are still making YouTubes out of it. And I talked to Rod a couple of years ago, and still the wheels of justice are moving, as they say, slowly. And I think he pointed out the reason why. I mean, there is complicity between church and state here, the Vatican involved. I mean, you have nuns changing records on children, knowing they're going to go into a psychiatric ward, many to be killed, and they allow this to happen. Now you know why we do our show here, because somebody has to speak out about it. And I think what I'll do is, in the weeks to come, I'll try to track down Rod Vienneau and do another story with him. And it won't be hard, because I still have his phone number. So we'll track down Rod Vienneau. And listen, thanks for coming by. And I'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday. Don't forget to go to my website, arcticbeacon.com, and hit that donate button, because we are listener-sponsored, running a pledge drive, and need to get some money to keep this show going. So listen, every little bit helps, and I appreciate it tremendously on the people that have donated so far. And thank you for that. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.